Welcome, everyone. This is a DataMesh book club, and we've got the usual suspects here. This week, Matt has kindly agreed to lead, and we are on Chapter 4, so I'm going to let him go ahead and take it away.
So I just highlighted, like everybody, I highlighted things that popped out to me, and I'm sure lots of you have your own discussions. This was a meteor chapter, at least it was to me, as far as trying to get down to where can we go with what we currently have and what she's trying to nail down. It's less theoretical and more practical, but I've got lots of questions. So anyway, so yeah, she talked about her initial two fundamental shifts was distributed data architecture and the ownership model, and then data as a shared and usable product. And she comes right out the gate that with this, she gets some strong resistance. Basically, they're saying now you're having me share analytical data as a product, in addition to also building applications and doing everything as our normal day job. And so they complain, how do I hire engineers who already are hard to find to staff in every single domain? So now we're getting to overlapping skills and that kind of sense. How do we enforce this over distributed fashion to avoid chaos? And of course, extending the responsibility for team to not only build, but share data and everything else. And I can see that resistance. So I was interested to see what her comments was. And a lot of it falls on the platform for doing a lot of heavy lifting. And so she said, yeah, I'll make changes to scale out sharing. This is what the platform should do. Scale out sharing, accessing, using in a decentralized manner. So of course, that's the whole point of all this. She does get into targeting general technologists, which she talks about who those are later. And I had some questions and thoughts on that one. But then she does say the platform itself is still maintained by a dedicated team. So you do still have that central team, but their product is the platform rather than being the holistic data engineering team for the organization. So you do still have a team. So I don't know if this is a subset that you can peel off of your current team. Let's say a big organization who's already spent all this money and has all these practitioners, or are they actually looking to hire a new team? I'm not sure. We'll see where that goes. This graphic, she's putting everything on the data platform. I didn't get much else out of it other than that, but I do like her happy team over here on the left. That's pretty funny. So moving on, she's comparing the what current platforms out there do now and where DataMesh will fit. And so she talks about the usual analytic storage, processing frameworks, querying languages, the data catalog itself, and then the pipelines. And then she kind of has her take on this. So rather than the centralized data teams, this is of course what we've heard already. She's got self-serve autonomous domain-oriented teams. So that's the big key takeaway on that one. Lynn and the others have really mentioned she's really tying in code with data as one unit, as opposed to everything being separate pieces. A lot of the stuff we've seen designed for the generalist majority that comes out again. And I've got questions on that later. It's a big chapter, so I'm going kind of fast to leave us room for Q&A, but we've all read it. So if you have insight, just definitely shout it out. But
yeah, I had an observation on the diagram 4.2. So when that one you just so in the middle one, this is one she's going to talk about that I'm still kind of struggling with, was this idea of the staff or the specialist who's going to support it, and in a very large organization with big data domains, it's a little easier to sort of think about we might do some specialized things, so we're going to need our own people. But the challenge that I keep sort of coming back to is, what if I was a CIO trying to set this up for a company? Then I'm going to bump into the shared service problem of do I invest in some specialists because I know there's going to be enough data domains that are going to need that specialty that I can support the staff, or the freedom is a non-shared service idea, which is every data domain can do whatever the heck they want and hire who they need, so long as in the end the economics all work out. But I'm really struggling to sort of figure out it organizationally from a people point of view. how we get to this mix of generalists can do lots and lots of things, but when we get all the way down to the data domain, I think they're going to need specialists to do what, given what tools they might pick.
So I'm in this now, genomics again, and one of the ways it's manifesting is how things are provisioned. So as the particular enterprise I'm working with is going from a ticket-based provisioning system to more cloud-native data mesh provisioning, what they've done is the sort of gray square at the bottom in their new implementation has had less control. So in some ways it should be drawn, I think, differently. For data mesh, the gray square should be smaller rather than others, because the way they've implemented the provisioning is there's a certain organizational policies in this case around data egress that are enforced. That's the gray square. But once you are in your particular environment in this new data meshy kind of situation, then those specialists, can someone mute? I don't know who's got background. Then those specialists get more control. And what that's looking like, because I literally was conducting a training today, so it's kind of near and dear, is they have to understand more about the implementation of the data. So it often comes down to buckets or lakes or BigQuery data sets, whereas before those data experts did not have that control. So to Norman's point, it to me is addressed with training, because once you're inside the boundary of your data domain, then these specialists do have more responsibility. Somebody has to do the job, right? Like very, very pragmatically, who can delete data, right? That's a very pragmatic implementation of data mesh. And the way I'm seeing it is that's pushed down towards the domain data owners, but they can't just blindly, they're not just gonna, like to Norman's point, they're not just gonna suddenly like, oh, I know how to manage data recovery. Like even something simple like configuring the bucket number of backups and the lifecycle policies. These all require education of the data domain owners, because these are concerns they didn't have before. They were handled by the enterprise. So, you know, I'm probably more focused than many on training because I'm a consultant who trains, or, you know, at a main, so I do a lot of training. But I see in my clients that I'm working with on this, that part is not maybe as accounted for in the discussion in the book. So I think Norman's right on there.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, this book is so new and the industry is evolving. I kind of glean that stuff like how many backups do you retain? All that other stuff is, in her mind, is low level. That's handled at the platform level, so that the domain people don't have to worry about that. They might say, I put the data in, I'm assuming it's backed up. Now, maybe the platform people or the CIO and how do we handle data as a whole across organization? Those rules are enforced at the platform, but the product owner, they don't care.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. But I think there's a tension, right, between the maturity of this from like a practice, from a technology perspective, in terms of the platforms that exist and the platforms that people build, right? The more the platform obfuscates the complexities and the rules that people have to follow, the less training you need, right? Because it's just simple, or it's part of their normal day job, right? But until like we have that sort of platform maturity that either organizations internally develop, or like, you know, Dataplex and Data Zone kind of like are there and comprehensive, like, I think, Lynn, it's a really good point that like training is the gap, right, that fills that in. Like you could probably do a data mesh just by making sure everybody, like you basically turn everybody into a, you know, kind of data governance and data engineering expert, right? Through training, right? That would be like the extreme side. But it's obviously difficult to scale. So I think like the more that technology can obfuscate that complexity from people, the closer we'll be to what's being proposed here. And Varsha is so polite. Go ahead. Take the mic.
Yeah, but I was just thinking in this way that here, what we need exactly is, of course, governance, and the domain owners should periodically be trained, and the governance policies also be reviewed periodically, because it is changing. Not the policies changing, but the environment, the threats, the way we are evolving, it is changing every day. So today what we are talking may not be really very fruitful tomorrow, so down the line, maybe in just 3 months, we see what we decided 3 months back is not working today. So we might need to tweak the policies because people are changing, and we do not have the owner's view is different. Domain owner's view is now changing. Data kind of which is being streamed out, the quality, the significance is getting changed. So what I think, and when we are trying to implement this kind of architecture, I would see that probably at the industry level, I'm not sure how would it be, but the training, of course, and it should be periodic. It's not that once being trained, done. No, it's like every 3 months or something. When we see the technology is changing, some architectural changes are coming, some new things are evolving. So the content should be changed, would be tweaked, and people should be trained. And even if suppose I got trained 3 months back, I should be imbibed for this training again, so that whatever new comes, I should be aware of it. That's what I think. Otherwise, consistency will not be there. And in the last chapter, we were discussing about how many things we will learn. But the way it is evolving, the new things are coming. Learning is the only way. We cannot survive the way things are moving around. It's very fast paced. So I guess Norman has a point. Designated areas, owners should be defined, and those policies should be defined, and it should go under the surveillance, maybe. Like, how does it go? Somebody should observe that, and then just what all are if it is going 2 months, 2.5 months, good, we're fine. Or not, what changes we should make, and then just another 3 months down the line, we must train people again. Lots of technologies are coming. Are we overcoming this challenge or not? What we have seen in just this quarter or some other quarter this way. I see this is the only way right now getting people trained on it. Because technology is there, but we are not ready to accept the fact it's changing.
Norman, you had a hand up.
Yeah, so generally, some of the observations have been around what I would say, operational. I expect to have backups. I expect sort of these things and I think she does make reference to those sort of disciplines where we're going to be out there underneath supporting. The one I'm particularly conscious of, though, is remember, a data domain has a whole lot of raw data, and they're crafting that into something that has value. And so that's where you start to get to data platform tools and some expertise around those particular tools. So let's say like in the DUF, right? Presumably they've got graph databases to recommend, oh, you like this, so you're probably going to like that because we've got the data structured that can do correlations like that. So now it's like, well, who else besides marketing might need a graph database platform specialists? Maybe not so many, but they're saying, well, we're in marketing. This is just something you have to have in retail or marketing. So we're going to have to fund that person, right? That specialty. And that's where I see the tension between, there are going to be things that will be common to a lot of data domains within an organization. And maybe that could be in the same shared service model. If everybody's going to be using it, well, let's create a resource allocation so you can get what you need, even if it's only a fraction sometimes. But the specialization, I'm just not convinced that that one is going to go away so easily, because we're going to encourage data domains to say, you're fairly autonomous in how you want to do these things. You figure it out, so long as in the end you can recover your costs within the organization and you're producing enough value that other people want to buy or, subscribe to, bear the costs of this product that you're putting out. Because I keep coming back to, I really like the economics around it's a product and each domain's like a little business. But then you start to get, how do you pay for a specialist that is a now and again? Is it worth it? So that's the tension. I'm still waiting to see how that works out.
Yeah. Jump in, Elliot. You had your hand up. I don't need to moderate everybody. You guys can just jump in unless you want me to.
Yeah, I think the graph database is an interesting point, but I think there's even more basic specialization skills that, like, again, without a system that makes it easy, like requires more training, more cognitive load on engineers and people and product and execution teams to make like ingressing data, egressing data, being able to combine and transform data, like without a platform capability that really makes those things easy for them, they're becoming data engineers, right? Because that's what we do all day. We ingress data, egress data, turn data into something else by combining data, transforming data. So those are kind of presented as like platform capabilities. And then they, I think it's not in this chapter where they talk about like the data product developer, which is a little more like specialized, but I think like, those basic gaps are fundamental, right? Like if the platform isn't there, you're going all the way down the rabbit hole of doing what we've called for years data engineering, right?
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll move along, is this is a recurring theme through the whole chapter. And she basically, as she tries to get towards this generalist person, she keeps saying that the data platform needs to take the heavy lifting. And even part of that, and we'll get to it later, but even the tooling needs to be easier. And I'll tell you right now, we're a Microsoft shop, so naturally we jumped on Power BI and other things like that. You can't hand Power BI and send someone to a dashboard in a day course if they're just a normal, non-data person. It's not like opening up Word or PowerPoint or something else. We've had data catalogs for years, and there's one or two people outside of IT who have jumped on it because trying to use those tools, they're not intuitive. Power BI it's to be nice. There's a lot of room for improvement on that. Just from a usability standpoint, it's not intuitive. It's got at least 3 different languages between Power M and DAX and other things if you want to do something beyond simple charting and graphing. And even just from a UI, the way you do conditional formatting in one place and adding bold is not the same way you bold and do colors and stuff in another area. And so just from a UI, I think the tool itself has a long way to go to be easy to use. And until we can make simple tools easy to use, I just fear for the day that we can make harder tools easy to use. But moving on. Oh, the other thing I had a little comment here. So she mentions integrating operational and analytical capabilities, and she made the distinction earlier. Your operational data is your data that's in the system, your transactional that makes it work. I don't know if she's implying that the DataMesh now takes on the role of being the platform for the operational system. I don't know why you do that, or if she's just implying that the DataMesh will have a copy of the raw operational that's real time. I'm not sure. So let's see. Yeah, she wants to cut out any dependence on centralized teams. So again, that's moving the data, democratizing it, and all the crafting of it and everything to the domains. Of course, yeah, the current vendors are assuming a centralized team. And of course, our discussion kind of shares that. That's just what we're all used to. And she's trying to break away from. And this is the other, she talks about ways they don't scale and other problems. And of course, this is how it is in our environment. I don't know others, but basically the people who are doing the data, we're using the same service accounts for everything. We change service accounts, but those aren't accounts that are user accounts. These aren't owned by the business team. These are owned by ITs and engineers. That's in our password management products. So how do we scale out and give individual users access? So again, she's hoping the platform will take care of that. She does say it's possible to create this on top of current technologies, but it's not very elegant, which is the case with almost anything when you're trying to do something new on top of your current vendors. She does talk about, she's saying, yeah, the team's experience should be connected and seamless, whether you're building or sharing. And so again, that's a heavy lift. Typically, consuming and building are two different use cases, and they're quite different. Me using Visual Studio and building a system is entirely different from someone opening in Chrome and using the system that I built. So it's interesting to hear what she wants to talk about that. So then she talks about how data and compute are often on two different entire fabrics. Lynn, I'm sure you and others have far more experience than I do about that, but I assume that is true. So then again, she's talking about her generalist mentality, and she says basically the way that we've been running has led to the creation of scarce specialized roles such as data engineers. And so, yeah, I hear all the time a lot of jobs are going, but the specialized engineering roles are still a hot commodity. They're hard to fill. And then she hits right to it. She says, well, some of the reasons for this is basically the vendor themselves have a lack of incentive to make their products simple to use. It's basically vendor buy-in, vendor lock-in when you use their stack, which is interesting. There's a great story from years and years ago, and supposedly one of the reasons why Excel became the de facto spreadsheet over Lotus 123 and the other ones of the day is because Microsoft allowed you to save an Excel document as a Lotus document and as those others. And they basically said that was the tipping point. The instant you realized I can try Excel, put all my stuff in Excel, and I have the freedom to move away from Excel should this not work out, suddenly everyone tried it. They weren't afraid of being locked in anymore. And that happened to be the one reason why, or one of the big reasons why Excel took the world. Because they made it available to get out of Excel, which I thought is a really cool story. So let's see, I got out of my things. Yeah, again, they want to keep the data and processing under their control. Again, vendor lock-in. So then she goes on to say it has to break the pattern. We must stay relevant to generalists. Again, there's that hard thing. Can we do that? Has to fit naturally into their native tools and then get out of the way. And that's the gold standard, right? That's the holy grail. If we could ever get to that, that's fine. We've seen it in some places. We've seen some really nice, small, slick, modern tools. My grandfather still uses an iPad. He can order groceries and all that kind of stuff because it was made simple and it was made in an environment that he likes to use. You know, you don't have to get on the computer and plug in your modem and go into some crazy thing. You can just open your app that you're already texting on and do whatever you want. So then she does say it has to be done without compromising the engineering practices. So yeah, we definitely can't lose the I don't want to say complexity, but the even granularity is not a good word, but the control that we have. She does talk about how over time when you try to do this, the low code, no code become unmaintainable. That is absolutely true. We've got some no code platforms in our industry. We use them and they've been great. One of my help desk team, he literally has developed over 100 workflows himself that have completely automated and modernized our entire IT support. And now that when we bring on new technicians, they just click the box, they follow the workflow. It has helped training. The training's built into the workflow. They know exactly how to do their job. When we have 8 different technicians and we find a new best practice, we change the workflow and all 8 are forced to actually use it. But the problem is none of those workflows are testable. There is no such thing as a TDD workflow. Unfortunately, the platform we use, as good as it is, they have an absolute proven history that they break things every time they come out with a new version. And we don't know what's broken, and there's no way to say, here's my TDD, here's my end-to-end testing. I want you to run the new version through all of our workflows and all of our customizations. It doesn't exist. And I think that's one of my biggest problems is we don't know it's broken until someone tells us it's broken. And you never want to find out the product that you support is broken when the end user finds it. So she gets into this. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking like, you know, as they talk about, as she talks about the generalist technology and kind of engineering best practices, if she's, you know, also, which I thought about, like carefully poking at like kind of the data community that hasn't always done this stuff, right? You know, adhered to engineering best practices and You know, kind of setting a generalist as a bar, you know, like whereby data engineers have been specialized, quote unquote, in doing things their own way, which maybe didn't follow these best practices. I think maybe she's trying to say that in a nice way, or at least I'm thinking it is. She's kind of describing the generalist over and over again.
No, I agree. I have never heard of this T-shaped or paint drip.
Yeah, I was about to say I didn't know. I didn't look up the reference, but
yeah, that's really funny. But basically, she said they have really wide, and then they get deep in certain areas. So, but she wants them to be able to work with the data. And this gets back to our conversation last week, right? Essentially, they're using AI as a service because they're going to be able to go through and use the platform and find what they need, not because they're data engineers or they're sleuths or investigators. It's because the platform using AI, they say, where do I find the latest personnel data? Oh, here you go, or whatever. Go ahead, Lynn.
So yeah, so I'm going to tell you about my little AI experiment. So my educational background is in linguistics. So I'm having my moment here with generative AI because to me, English is now a first-class programming language. And that is really rocking my world. And I'm hoping to extend that for my customers. So to take this sort of generalist thinking and to think about what generative AI could do, I'll give you a little example of an experiment that I tried. So one of my challenges with my genomics customers is the tool that they have, similar to what you're talking about, Matt, with Power BI. It's not usable enough for them. It's a great tool, but it's not usable enough. And the tool I'm talking about is BigQuery. So BigQuery is great for genomics because it's SaaS. There's no servers. There's no replication. There's pay by the query. So just really perfect and understands variant calling format files. Like, great thing. One little problem. Researchers don't know SQL query language, right? So there's BigQuery R, there's BigQuery Python, but then you have to learn something, la, 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 la. So I tried 4 prompts. This is what I tried. Prompt number 1, write me using public genomic data, the 5 most common queries that researchers do with a few more parameters there in BigQuery. It did. Second prompt, take those 5 queries, explain them in English for a bioinformatic researcher. Prompting, in case you don't know, if you give it a context, will be much, much better in terms of who the recipient is. Did an excellent job with that. The next one of the usability problems with this software as a service is not how you format things in bold, it's the pricing model, because the pricing model is really hard for people that come from CapEx world to go to this OpEx pay by the query. So my third prompt was, for these queries, return the following information: the estimated cost per query and the reasoning behind it, the number of rows returned, and the time to execute. And then the fourth prompt was, talk about the 3 most common optimization strategies for each of these queries to reduce the cost, to reduce the time. I showed it to my bioinformatics community. They were like, oh, great. Can I use this? Can I use this now to write my queries? So my conjecture here is that Gen AI has the potential to democratize the tools to accelerate the development of these generalist data people. And I'm really obviously very excited about it.
Yeah.
Now we all know that Gen AI is a generator of most likely, so it hallucinates. That's the actual formal word, right? And so one of the big training aspects of working with it is learning to recognize hallucinations. And it's really a cognitive mismatch for most developers because they're not used to tools that hallucinate. It's very difficult because they're used to, autocomplete in the IDEs and all that kind of stuff. But I'm telling you, as a user of these tools constantly for just a month now, once you get to that point, it's sort of like human. Like, If you work with a colleague who's kind of full of, and you realize, oh, this person kind of exaggerates, it's sort of the same way. You go, okay, the AI is going off now, and then you check it with another source because it tends to perpetuate if you're in a thread because it has context. But it's learning a different way of interacting with a tool. And I'm telling you that this, for me personally, has changed the way that I interact with technology, and I see a potential for this particular scenario. So I wanted to include the discussion here. So Elliot, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting from like a user experience perspective, like in terms of like English, right? Like prompting it for like the answers and that democratizing a lot of the stuff that we take for granted or we still find hard, but we know how to do, or we know how to find our way there. But I do think like, that's totally interesting. And I think another interesting way to look at it with generative AI is like, and I think about this all the time because this is what I do for a living, right? Like, hey, is it relevant that I write like can bang out like 1,200 lines of like cloud formation anymore, right? When your average large language model can like kind of build that pretty close to how I do it. But like thinking about like the platform, right, and the cognitive overhead of like the things we were just talking about, like the ingesting, the kind of egress of data, the transformation of data. But can the platform be powered by these models? I think the answer is like, yeah, in part, yes, for sure. It's almost definite. So maybe the platform that doesn't exist fully yet, unless you go and write a lot of code and build it yourself, could be answered with generative AI, like, right, like at like a platform level, like the code that makes all this work. Like, could you not have to think about it as much as a developer, or on who's maybe more of a generalist?
Well, ChatGPT and the Google version of it are already integrated into their IDEs. Like, this is not a future. I mean, I think it's beta still, but it's already there. So the way of producing technical artifacts is already enabled through these editors that you would have the integration of. I mean, the Visual Studio one is more broadly available. So VS Code with Copilot, and then now with ChatGPT plugin. So and there's several great YouTube videos out there already. So the idea is that you will have your more, like pair programming, if you will, with the ChatGPT plugin. Like, write me I want to deploy the blah, 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 blah. What should I do? And it'll say, write Terraform or write Azure Resource Templates. It'll tell you like the concept. And then, give me the starting 5 points. And then you can go start writing comments in the IDE, and Copilot will start generating. From a high level, what it's caused the change in my technical work is I'm more inclined to experiment because it's faster, which again, I think leads to the possibility for more generalist people, data people, if they consider Gen AI one of these tools, because it fills that gap in skills that we've been talking about. Yes, there's traditional training, there still will be, but the tooling, it's like building a house or building a road with by stomping your feet on the road versus using a shovel versus using like a digger or something, right? It's different levels of tooling. And one of the things that is interesting to me is that this tooling is out now, and this paradigm shift is being attempted now, and the big gap is in education and skills. And could there be an augmentation there that could facilitate the need to skill up the generalists? I mean, probably a lot of words there, but that's what I've been thinking. Go ahead, Barsha.
Yeah, so my question to you, Lynn, so in your experiment, when did you say that bring out the cost of the query or that from the lake? So did you provide the source, or how did you get the cost or estimation about it?
So if you've not used the tools, they're chatbots. So one of the things that I love to test is how little can I say like almost to a real person, like how much context will be carried from the previous thread. And sometimes it's not enough, but a lot of times you can just say this or previous.
Oh, okay.
You can, it doesn't always work, but I'm really testing how, and I'm not demonstrating it here, but how terse can I be? How few words can I prompt with?
So it's pretty much depending upon the session opened, then it can only track up the previous context. Is that?
That's the way it seems to be. It's like a thread. Go ahead, Matt. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, finish your thing first. That's fine.
Okay, so when now I'm referring back to the book, and I'm referring the picture 4.1. If we go up there, so I see there's a complete one platform being shown. So does that platform mean is the self-serve data platform? So when we see this, does it say that the whole domain has got one big platform and the outcome is being shared? Does that mean this?
So the way that I would see that is that's organizational policies. So for example, in one of my clients, every project has to be in a VPC boundary. So that is part of the self-service data platform. That if somebody is trying to create something or work outside of a VPC or a defined firewall, if you will, that will not be allowed. So there are certain organizational rules that whether you're at the top level of Azure or AWS or Google, they're defined at that level.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Matt,
Okay, Matt, you've been waiting, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's fine. And then, when she brought up this screen too, I had thought we almost could, she wants them to have their own product, and there's no requirement that the platform be the same. And so what that got to me was like, okay, usually in an organization, you would have the same platform, economies of scale, keep the costs low, but it's not unheard of that your fiscal team has their products on one platform, your HR and whatever team has their product on an entirely different platform. I was like, that truly would be centralized. And I thought, I wonder how this would affect mergers and things like that. So if she truly had her gold standard of standardized inputs and outputs and criteria, would this affect large companies that, for 2 years, their data is an absolute disaster because they're trying to fit all this stuff together that was never meant to be? Could this lead to a place where I don't care where your data is, we've all agreed on how we're going to treat it, and I can use it. There's no need to force it all into the same platform.
So the big thing that I see here is data classification, and this is based on risk. So I'll take the genomics example. So public data has a certain set of rules applied to it. And then on the other side, PHI or personal health information or patient data. Because this is a struggle I'm having with some of my clients. So where you have a challenge is what's here, what's in the middle. Do you have de-identified research data where you had PHI, but you removed the patient information, but there's different ways you have to de-identify so that can't be reverse engineered back to the patient, and it's non-trivial, right? Do you just remove the patient ID, or do you have to obfuscate the data by adding more fields to it or removing other fields or whatever? So fintech really, I think, is most mature here. Before I worked in genomics, they'll have like 4 levels of classification, and the cloud vendors match to this, and the products are designed for this. So fully public to completely secret, and then they have 1 or 2 levels in the middle. And you can set up your data products either to have all those classifications within a product or to separate your products. That's the difference that I'm seeing, right? So, and then of course you have to make exceptions because life is never clean, right? But so like an example would be, if I'm working with a hospital, all PHI data, bam, that's just locked down, right? And then you have these other levels. But if I'm working with a research institute, then it might be sort of by study, right? And then within the study, we have some public data, and then we have some data that is controlled access, right? So it's the kind of thing that I see. So in health and in finance, I see a lot of this. Also, children's data because of COPPA. Don't you have that at school? Yeah, Matt.
Oh,
And then also GDPR. GDPR is its own thing with data being many different restrictions. I haven't done too many GDPR because usually people who do that have more training than I have. So it's this classification though is the meta thing, which is figuring out the classification scheme. And that often blocks development of data projects because you got to get to agreement. And I find a lot of organizations that are maturing have to have all these committees and these discussions, and it really blocks forward movement. So go ahead, Elliot.
Yeah, I was going to say this, so the classification is a really important part. And like, I think, you could have all the technology to kind of obfuscate the tech stuff, but then you're getting into the data governance and what is proposed as computational governance, which I know is not like covered yet in what we spoke about, but that's what I think about. So like, how are you going to take those classification rules and say like, okay, well, we're going to centrally make these decisions and design these policies, but they're going to be programmatically enforced, right? So like,
well, not to be just monologuing here, but there's starting to be tools in GCP. There's data loss protection. And it's in all the cloud vendors now.
Yep.
And you then take your organizational policies and you implement them as policy as code. That's a new thing, right? Infrastructure as code, so policy as code.
Yeah.
And then you do ongoing scanning for compliance to policy. And then you have a chief data officer, chief privacy officer, who is in charge of the data governance. But like Elliot said, we might be getting a little ahead of ourselves here. So there's a whole chapter on that. So
yeah, and the other thing too, at least we've played with some of that in our environment, and what I saw was largely reactive in the sense that I would define a policy, and that's well and good, and I can either lock it down, you're not allowed to do anything outside the policy, or I can get reporting on where there might be violations. Who is sharing a document with someone else that can contain PII or something like that. What I like about this idea is if, again, the platform does its work, we create tags or other things, but basically, can you classify your data? So it could be based off of security, where you're allowed, what's public, what's not, which fields need to be encrypted on the database, which don't. For us, also, it's retention. We have certain data that has to be retained for life. We've got other data that can 5 years, or something like that. But I in IT should not be the one that has to know and determine that. Hopefully the product owners, the data owners know, my risk management, my HR, or special ed, or discipline. They say, oh yeah, this data has to be retained for 7 years. Great, go find the column wherever in your database, mark that, and then the platform knows what to do with it. And I like that idea, because then rather than the policy being reactive and giving me reports of where it's violated, it's like the database itself knows. And if a person logs in who should not see the data, you are prevented from actually getting the data. Now, most of the policies I've seen, at least with Microsoft, deal with documents. So emails, Word documents, spreadsheets. Hey, did you just share a spreadsheet that has, NDI information in it? That's where I see that being very applicable. None of that stuff's in a database now. So we'll see. The other thing I was wondering when they talked about AI, and then I'll move on. We're already 46 minutes in, so I don't mind, finishing the other half as we go. But the other thing I thought about when you guys were talking about AI, maybe my hesitation that this grand scheme of hers isn't just another resurgence of what I've heard over the last 10 years, 20 years, every time a new paradigm comes out. Maybe that's the whole thing. We've never had generative AI before. We've never had a tool that really could actually solve this problem for us. So, yeah. Brave New World would be fun. Again, she's going into why she favors decentralized. Obviously, when you have dependent resources, no matter what, it's going to slow things down. I like the idea of a shared resource where maybe you need a data engineer for only a few months out of the year. But again, by definition, that is a blocking resource. So she is trying to get the power into the hands of the owners. Yeah, this is a comment I've seen a lot in the last several years. The underlying technology architecture actually directly influences how the organization communicates. There's been books written about that. If you buy a really complex platform, if you're using SAP, all of a sudden you realize your teams and marketing and sales are built around how SAP works, not how the organization works all the time.
Yeah.
True.
So then she wants it to be domain agnostic. Yeah, right now, data teams are responsible for how their data is used as well as the underlying technology. So you guys have talked about that, bucket storage, where is that at? Backup retention, that's all tied into this too. So again, the same concept, she's just talking about it. She goes into what she means by platform. This all seemed common sense to me, so I didn't highlight a whole lot of stuff there. I didn't know if you guys had any comments on what a platform is. So she's also talking about using automation. Again, she's saying the platform needs to really abstract all of this non-value add work. We, of course, there is value to it, but honestly, like in your bioinformatics things, Lynn, the value add is the bioinformatic people using the system, not understanding what buckets are and distributed architecture and stuff like that. So, and then she says another way around that is to automate things. So of course, we're all fans of that. So then I thought this was interesting. She said your products have to be, and platform has to be designed to not only do within the organization, but also outside. I don't know how many of you share your data lake with, vendors outside. That's cool. Of course, then she says, the interoperability of data sharing securely and across platforms. So then again, we have no standards. If I'm an Amazon shop and you're a Google shop and our friend is a Microsoft shop, how do we share all this stuff without that overhead of translating languages and security architectures and all that kind of stuff? So again, she's going to a really nice idea that, like the open source days and other things, and she mentions Unix earlier. How about we build small, specific tool sets with a standardized language, and maybe we can all get there. I don't know how much Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are going to be willing to do this, but we'll see. So she starts talking about how do you see the value of a data mesh organization. I like that she says that you got to remove all the activities that don't actually contribute to what they're trying to do, making it really easy to find, capture, and use data. So this graph, I don't know if you guys got a lot out of it. I was trying to figure out what she was doing here other than saying, foster innovation, yay, rah, rah, we all get to do cool things. You thought of it in the shower and come into work and do it, type thing. So, she says, how do we do this? She talks about considering your two main personas, your developers and your users. Remember, she kind of said that this platform should be applicable to both. She also talks about enabling them. The developer is managing the life cycle of the data product, code, data, policies as one unit. So again, we're talking about the data and code together. We're talking about the owners actually managing the life cycle. God bless her if this is possible. I would love it if my financial people owned the quality of their data from one end to the, they do, they try. Same thing with our HR. I find a couple of records. We're trying to say, how many employees are we, putting in classrooms and all these other things. And then we find out there's some employees that don't have leave dates and yet they don't work here anymore and things like that.
As a quick thing on the scroll up a little bit, it's come up before, but the code, the policy, and the data, like all is one. I think the quanta. How many of you envision that as almost like a container, right? That has and she uses the container metaphor a lot with sidecars and everything. as it being like almost a, you know, a technology solution, like almost like really a container, or is she talking more philosophically about like, hey, the same team is owning all of these things and kind of packaging them and maintaining them together?
That's
Like
what
you
I
guys,
was about to, just to bring up this thing here, that the current team structure, what we have in our data community, can we imagine the way it has been described here, which is somewhere a little mismatched? That's what we have. And is there any possibility we can fit in the same structure, same people, I mean, architecture, what we have right now, our data engineering, what I would call the whole data community, to fit in this this architecture, which is presenting right now?
yeah, I think she talks about that, right? Them either graduating
Right.
to be like data product developers, where we are expecting specialization, or being part of the central data infrastructure team.
So again,
So at the granule, it is fine. That's what I could perceive. But when I think of a complete organization having multiple domain, and there comes the interconnection, then it confuses me. Now here, the policies and the governance should be coming into the role, which is important than the product. I mean, it should serve out the best way. But here the confusion is, would it be really serving and coming under the data mesh and how the architecture being presented? Would it come?
So again, I'm in it right now. So one of the reasons I'm in it is because my customers' biggest part of their cloud bill is not EC2. I'm the unique one. You know, until I switched into genomics, it was always the VMs, right? It's always the VMs, right? It's not. In genomics, it's the storage. That's how much that's how much storage it is. That's kind of mind-blowing because storage is so cheap, right? But the big part of the bill is storage, okay? And money drives change. So this is the reality that centralized governance cannot understand the data to manage it, to manage the life cycle. I mean, I'm literally in this with one customer. They have 17 petabytes of archival data, and they don't know what to do with it because they centralized it. They've got data.
The owners aren't owning it
because they didn't implement a mesh. And so what they're now doing is they're moving from one system that's over capacity, and they're moving all that 17 petabytes to the cloud because they don't have a data mesh, because they don't have anybody at a data domain level. So again, genomics is so fascinating because it's the front, because of the volumes of data, right? So anyway, so now on the other side, I'm working with these teams that are getting this push down. And we, you know, literally as part of the education is like, okay, now you own the data. Before it was they had allocation on a colo, and then they just got to their capacity. Now, even at the very primitive, they have, okay, you could put your data in a bucket. You need to configure the bucket. You need to configure the life cycle. You need to understand about cold line, near line archiving, You could put your data in BigQuery. So the Amazon would be like Redshift, because then you'd get the ability to have different compute. You could put your data in the local instance for your notebook, and understanding like what to do with your data, because now the allocation goes from CapEx to OpEx, and for their research grants, they're going to have to budget for data inside of this. They have to manage it. They have to be data stewards. So again, it's interesting because I know in so many other domains, this is not the case. It's centralized. I mean, more of my career was like that. But as the data volumes become massive, this thinking makes a lot more sense because it's economically driven for the business, right?
It's not a problem until it is, right? That's why she's doing this. And then you're in the fringe that sees it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Because I can understand, because I have a whole bunch of years of, small and medium business, why this just seems so foreign, right? I mean, just the fact of my customers, all of them, their biggest part of their cloud bill is storage. I mean, that's, to anybody that's worked in cloud, that's an anti-pattern, right? You don't optimize for storage.
Usually that gets beat by CloudWatch.
Right? Exactly. Right?
Miss
So,
LDQs too.
yeah. I want to show something just really quick. I know you're not done with the chapter, but I want to just show something. So I'm going to share.
Oh,
my
we're only
screen.
halfway through, so we're not going to get through this.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
because this was interesting about Google. So Microsoft's been really good for this, but this is kind of more new in Google. They have added these more patterns that start to use some of the data mesh capabilities. So this is a jump start. Microsoft has tons of these, but this is interesting, and I think Amazon has this too. Notice what happens here. You've got a Terraform template that works with data sources, pumps it into storage, and then not only does data lake, but starts to use their data mesh product suite, which is Dataplex. So this is the governance. So in other words, it's sort of like a gentle introduction to help customers to start to get into a mesh. So it's like a mini mesh, if you will. And this is something that they introduced last week at Google I/O, and I'm very anxious to try out because it's very, I guess, Amazon-like too, because Amazon's very good for making CloudFormation templates. I really, really love this, that they have the minimum price and then they have time. I just really think this is fantastic. And for me, for my customer right now working in GCP, this is something I definitely will try out because I think of this as like data mesh light. And so one of the things I'll do in subsequent presentations is I'll tell you how this worked out for me. But I just kind of wanted to mention that because I don't know, Elliot, if you've looked at any of this stuff for Amazon yet. We had when you were with us, we had a presentation from Norman on Data Zone. And I haven't looked for Azure either, but I would like to. But the ease of that, of click the button and you can start working with this was really interesting to me because as we've all discussed, concepts are great, but getting some tangible hands-on, it really helps with our learning. So yeah. I'm gonna be working on that. So
yeah, what I liked about what I just saw is it almost seemed like Rang is like a transition state. Right?
Yes.
It seemed very like in between. Like a lot of the pattern was somewhat familiar, but now integrating Dataplex and it's really interesting.
Yes, I wanted to share that. Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. Matt, thank you. We're not meeting for 2 weeks because of the holiday. Matt, would you be okay with just picking up finishing the chapter the next time?
Certainly, yeah. Okay. We're only halfway through, and I didn't expect us to get through it. So I love all the comments and questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to pause the video here. Okay.